What's up, Life Group Leaders? Brian, I'm back again. We are in, believe it or not, week 7 of our Titus Save for Good series. Like I say each and every week in these videos, I hope you've been enjoying this series. There's only, I think, 4 or so weeks left. We're getting towards the end of this letter to Titus. But each and every week, I hope as you've engaged with the scriptures, as you've discussed the passage in your life groups each and every week, that your love for Jesus has grown and that you're looking more and more like Him and less like the world around us, which is the underlying theme of the book of Titus. The church in Crete was looking more like Crete than they were like Christ. And so Paul needed to correct that. And it's the same correction that needs to be made of the church today a lot of times, is that we look a lot like the culture around us because our world is really, really good at making disciples in its own image. But we need to be reminded and then reoriented back to the truth of the gospel to be holistic disciples for Jesus. And so these past couple of Sundays, we've slowly worked our way through Titus chapter 2 with this underlying theme that what you believe should influence how you live. Orthodoxy, what you believe, should influence orthopraxy, your way of life. Or if you want to make it as simple as possible, your doctrine should influence your devotion. And so for Paul, he needed to let this young church know that they've been off the mark doctrinally in what they believe because of the fruit of their life. So they need to be reoriented back to the truth of the gospel. And so 2 weeks, Adam walked us through the 4 different groups of people in the church: the elderly men and women, the elderly women and men. And then last week, Drew continued that theme of what you believe should influence how you live with this idea of how we work. So even how we do our work each and every day in our jobs is a witness to Jesus for good or for bad, and it's worship to Jesus for good or for bad. And so this underlying theme of doctrine and devotion has been at the forefront of Titus 2. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, the gospel should influence every nook and cranny of your life. And then in our passage this Sunday, though, Paul shifts the argument, or he grounds the argument in what I would like to say, it's like, what's the foundation for pursuing godliness? What's the foundation for pursuing to be Titus 2, 1 through 10 people? It's the gospel. Grace is the only persevering foundation for the Christian life. If you try to root yourself and motivate yourself outside of the gospel, outside of grace, you may see fruit in your life spiritually in seasons, but it won't last. When you fail, because we all will in our walk with Jesus, we're going to fail a lot. We'll get discouraged, or we'll ultimately just forsake the gospel altogether. We'll forsake Jesus altogether when it gets difficult. And so Paul, he wants this young church to know, if you're going to pursue life with Jesus and righteousness, you need to be rooted in grace. The grace needs to be your motivator. It needs to be what gets you out of bed in the morning, spiritually speaking. And so it needs to be the foundation. Every other foundation in the world will fail us if it's not rooted in grace. And so that's the first point. Grace is the foundation, but also the gospel, or you could say the truth of the scriptures, is also our teacher, or you could say it's our instruction. The gospel trains us how to pursue righteousness by telling us what's sin and what's to forsake. The scriptures tell us that. This is sin, flee from that. And then here's what righteousness is, pursue that. The gospel teaches us how to do that. And so for Paul, he needs them to understand the gospel isn't just your foundation, it's also your instruction in the way of righteousness. If you want to be Titus 2, 1 through 10 people, the way you do that is to grow in your understanding of the truth. And then his final argument will be this idea of the hope of the gospel. So why should you pursue this? Why should you try to grow in your likeness to Jesus? Because there's a day where Jesus will return and He'll make all things new. We know in the end that Jesus ultimately wins. Death will be defeated. Sin will be defeated. The world will be renewed. We'll live perfectly and freely in God's creation. And so Paul wants that hope to be what guides them. Just to be reminded of, as you pursue righteousness, know that there's grace for you when you fail, but also know that Jesus is coming back. And there will be a day where sin is no more. And let that drive you to pursue daily obedience to Jesus. And so there's a lot in this short 4 or 5 verses in Titus 2 that has a lot for us. And so some cool conversation could happen around this passage. I think a really maybe interesting question could be um, getting at the motivation of the people in your life group, saying, I mean, what is the foundation of your life? What motivates you each and every day? Or I always like to say, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Because people have a lot of different foundations in this world. They have a lot of different motivating factors. It can be their career, it can be success and money, notoriety, it can be being the best parent, having a great family. Those things are all good, but they're not ultimate. Where Paul is trying to correct us, he's trying to reorient us back to be people rooted in the gospel of grace. And so I hope your groups go well this week. I hope you've been enjoying, again, this series. We are for you. Let me know if there's anything you need. And man, just keep showing up, like I say every week. A lot of ministry is just being faithful, just show up, being steadfast, knowing that the fruit comes from ultimately God's Spirit. And so we're cheering you guys on. We're excited for what God's been doing in your groups and what He's going to keep doing the rest of this year. See you guys next week.